the soul chose you ahead of 8 billion others. That's got to be the greatest act of unconditional love that you will ever experience. Every time we make a tiny little decision, we create another reality. Humanity is evolving towards a more energetically informed state of being. It's now time for people to understand their immortality while still in life, not having to wait till the end of it to discover it. All endurance that we take, all of the challenges that we have chosen are divinely guided. Every moment of every day, your soul knows exactly what it's doing. When you remember beyond human memory that you're immortal, that you're multidimensional, that you're here to make a difference to humanity, you are set free from the foibles of human life. The soul will continue to reproduce itself into different timelines as long as it can continue to learn with the intention that it arrived here with. When we're outside of time and space, we can be in all of those different places at once. So how can we be in all these places at once if we're not multidimensional? Well, for me, it's all about time and space. And in terms of life between lives, it's the absence of it. And we have this incredible linear understanding of the universe. And, I'm sitting here and I'm 60 years of age. But I remember when I was 50, 40, 30 and 20. So my life is a collection of memories that are in linear time. Now, that's just in Pete's body. But once we transcend time and space and we look at something from a quantum physicist's view, from an energetic practitioner's view, from someone who works on the other side, time and space doesn't look the same. So when we move out of the reincarnation cycle and observe it from outside of time and space, it's simply one soul lineage of a collection of experiences that are all unfolding at once. Any quantum physicist will tell you that time and space isn't as we see it. There's different dimensions in string theory, and then you've got the multiverse and all of this. So science and spirituality are collapsing together into the field of consciousness. So for me, life between lives is when you finish that incarnation, where do you go? And Dr. Michael Newton mapped that across 7,000 people, wrote a number of books, started his work back in the 60s. He passed away about 6 or 7 years ago now. But he wrote a number of books. He trained a whole raft of practitioners who are now in 40 countries doing the work in 20 languages. We take people to the end of the past life. We step into the afterlife outside of time and space. We take a sweeping view across the lineage of the soul, which includes the current incarnation. So when you're outside of time and space and you're looking back at Amrit, from that higher awareness, you can ask questions, well, why did I take the life as Amrit? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? Who do I incarnate with at different times? So all of these questions have started to unfold. And the beauty of Michael's work is that we've now reproduced it tenfold with 200 of us around the world, over 200 of us. So it's an incredible field of work that leverages what's really happening in the afterlife.
I sort of perceive, and the awareness that's coming to me is like the sine wave. I don't know if you've seen the sine wave before, and there's there's certain parts which are above the line and there's certain parts which are equally below the line. And I'm sort of visualizing the life that we can see that we're in as what I'm identifying as Amrit is above the line, and then there's the below the line bit. And the curiosity in these life between lines, like what's going on below the line, and then boom, back above the line, and there's like we're back below the line with the sine curve. And because and the engineer in me sees it that way, because I guess you mentioned the word map as well, and zooming out, us being able to sort of look at the different humps and go, oh, those are all the different live bits, and that's all the space between the lives.
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting exploration. What drew, because obviously you're a bit of a legend in the space of even Michael Newton's work, but what drew Michael, obviously I'm trying to get you to put words in the horse's mouth, but what drew him to explore these, like the parts where we dip out of these lives and what we're doing on the other side? What drew him there, do you know?
Well, I love it when cynics discover something by accident.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions today, because I'm sure there are some cynics listening in as well. Sorry, go on, please.
Well, I had a corporate career. This was all taboo sort of stuff for me.
You were a banker. 30 years
you
didn't just have a corporate career. You were the infrastructure. Sorry.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as a reformed banking executive now, Amrit. But Michael was a traditional psychologist working back there. And I mean, I'm the first person to say that we learn through our clients. We see the universe through their eyes, and that informs us on how we can help people more. So, there's no manual on this stuff. We've had to discover this in the frontiers of consciousness ourselves through the eyes of our clients. And that's how Michael started. Michael was researching somebody, and then they flipped off. He was trying to, a psychosomatic pain for a fellow in the shoulder, and he went into the pain. He was a traditional psychologist, but he did some hypnotherapy. He went into the pain, and the guy flipped into a World War I life. He was being stabbed in the trenches, and a bayonet was being pushed into his shoulder. So Michael thought, oh, this is interesting. But then he wrote to the War Office in London and confirmed every detail the guy gave him. So that enrolled him in the reincarnation piece. When he went further into the in-between, he was working with a lady who was suffering from extreme depression and loneliness. And he, again, back to the source, where does this come from? And she flipped into the afterlife and was talking to her soul friends. And they're saying how she needs to incarnate without them this time in order to learn more independence. So he started to explore that. Then he took other clients there and other clients there and other clients there. But he wouldn't really map the afterlife until he had hundreds of cases supporting each of the pieces that he was doing. Because, this is a guy that had done a PhD and all that sort of stuff, chronic research stuff, very traditional, heterosexual, white American fellow that, full of integrity, one of the good old guys from the old days, old-fashioned values. He wanted to make sure everything lined up beautifully before he went to the world. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, he went to a vast number of publishers and he was too far out there for them.
Because this was like 50, 60 years ago now already, yeah?
Yeah. And it was he worked for something like 30 years before he published his first book. So the first one finally came out in the 90s. Someone finally took him on, and, of course, the rest is history. He's probably sold 1 million books now. So started our organisation and off we went.
And so you started to map he started to map, and then obviously, like you said, being the Australian, like a legend in the Australian space for all this work as well, like, you've supported that, and there's, some innovations that you've brought to the field since his passing as well. But how do you start to map the other side? Or how are you even taking people into the other side, and then how are you mapping their experiences? Yeah. Can you give us a little bit around the how before we get to the innovations? Yeah.
Well, for me, and I started work as a humble hypnotherapist over 20 years ago now. And I always was taught to take people down into trance. But then I thought, well, if you go down into something, what about the out there stuff? What about the quantum field? What about the afterlife? I mean, is the afterlife in here, or is it out there, or is it both? Or do you go in to go out? I mean, these are conversations we've been having about consciousness for generations. For me, it's about an expanded state of awareness that transcends the physical and human condition into something that is so much more. I mean, at the moment, Amrit is your disguise for this lifetime. Pete is my disguise for this lifetime. Our disguises are talking, but so much more is happening out there. People are listening to this podcast through their disguises, but something might be just calling them a little bit to say there's so much more, there's so much more, there's so much more. And we see these little messages come to us from time to time through synchronicity, through things across our path, through people that we meet, through that underlying feeling that there is more to us than what we know. And that's a gentle nudge and push from the soul, I feel. So for us, people come to do these sessions and they've done past life before, etc. We take them to the end of that past life. We take them to where they leave their body, and we take them where they go. We follow them back home, if you like, back to the place where they came from in the first place. We transcend time, we transcend space, and we go to their spiritual home. And that's I believe that's part of the quantum field and accessible to all of us.
Because you do have some challenges with the word hypnotherapy, don't you?
Yeah, look, there's been too many stage shows over the years that probably haven't served us all that well. I went to a couple just to look at them sometimes, and I don't think I could stay past about the halfway point. But I mean, that's show business, and that's nothing to do with what we do. And to be honest, I don't really call myself a hypnotherapist anymore. It's more about the facilitation of consciousness, because I don't think it actually happens in a hypnotic state. That might be a good start point to get somebody relaxed, to get them out of their mind, to get them into more of a quantum field. But everything changed for me about 10 years ago when I stopped taking people down into trance and started to take them out of their bodies and into an expanded state that accessed the quantum field that had more resonance with an out-of-body experience than it did with hypnotherapy.
One of the questions that brings up for me, because you meant the little like nudges of the soul, is what you mentioned before as well. It was like, when you zoom out and you start seeing these sort of, again, I'm locked into that metaphor in my mind of the sine wave. But when you see the bits where we are like, alive and then we're sort of, in the afterlife and then we're alive and then we're in the afterlife, it does start to open up some questions around the soul's purpose and the soul's journey and what's because the mind itself in this journey can struggle so much with just why am I here in this incarnation. And we're talking about, like the map and the trajectory of like, it's going through multiple incarnations. Your explorations around the soul's purpose, I'd love to hear about that.
Well, in this type of work, and this informs some of the other things that I'm doing these days, but I'm seeing big shifts in this work, having been associated with Michael during his lifetime and, helping him to run his organisation across, 40 countries. We've seen so many trends. We've seen his work replicated into other cultures and other languages, which is the really interesting thing. It transcends geographical dynamics. It transcends things like social class, profession, background and culture, religious affiliation, transcends all of that and takes us into a common ground. So for me, when you look at the purpose thing, people used to come 20 years ago and they would ask me, what's my purpose in this lifetime? Now they come and they say to me, I'm here to be part of something. And there's an awakening on this planet, and I've come here in these times because I'm excited to be part of it. So this first big shift that I'm seeing is from me to we. And people are more inclined to connect with the collective purpose rather than an individual, unique one. And these conversations have changed, and they've been picking up speed more recently. There's so much happening. So that's the first trend. The second one is people are having lifetimes on other planets. And we're seeing a more cosmic flavour to this work. People are saying, well, I haven't been here all that often, but I've been in other places, and that's given me some skills to bring to this place in these times. And these are people that do telepathy. They've got better understanding of connecting with other people. They might be empath type people that feel the energies of others. So all of these people have a higher degree of energetic skills, and it looks like humanity is evolving towards a more energetically informed state of being. So that's the two. And the third one is that the structure that Michael put in place starting back in the 60s, published in his books and all of that, a lot of that structure is falling away. And we're finding that people are just soaring through spirit and out into this area of consciousness, and our role as a facilitator is to follow them and help them make sense of it. So, we're changing the way in which we teach Michael Newton's work now. We're doing everything that we've always done, but we're adding extra pieces on so we can get our people ready to steer the greater consciousness of these folks, not just home, but anywhere else they need to go.
Because one of the points that Michael, I remember you sharing about his work was the fact that you could be in your body and out of your body at the same time. So the sort of dual statedness that's available to the human or the soul, however you want to label it, was this kind of profound shift that he enabled for us. And maybe you can speak to that. But then also I'd love for you to sort of, I've got to stop doing this 2 questions in one, but then dive charge into your work, which then sort of said, if we can be in 2, why can't we be in more? Sorry, yeah.
Well, what I want to offer to the people listening is that, I've already talked about the disguise, but I'd like to speak to the multidimensional aspects of your being. And even in that traditional life between lives path that Michael originally designed, we'd take a client back in time. They would be 12 years old and we'd do a memory warm-up. They'd do one at 7. They'd do an early childhood memory. Then we'd have them in the womb and we'd say, why did you choose this body? So each time the client is in a different identity, and they'll talk like a 12-year-old. Sometimes they'll talk like a 7-year-old. Sometimes they'll be a little bit disembodied because they come and go from the womb. Then we end up in some sort of a past life persona. And it might be, I don't know, Igor the Viking. And all of a sudden I'm talking to Igor and he's raping and pillaging his way across Europe or something like that. And he's feeling guilty about that. And that's the life we need to see. And then we step out of Igor and the soul goes home. And they'll often say that they have a different name back there. It could be a word, it could be a vibration, it could be a symbol. So they have like an immortal name as well. So I might have taken John through, younger John and then unborn John and then Igor and then this soul name. So it occurred to me when we were doing that method that how can we be in all these places at once if we're not multidimensional? Well, I guess we are. And when we're outside of time and space, we can be in all of those different places at once. So multidimensionality just is characteristic of the universe. And I think we come here into linear time as the learning school that this place is. And we've always talked about this being a pretty tough classroom, by the way, if people are feeling that. And only courageous souls incarnate here from my, experience of the last 20-something years of doing this work, Amrit. So the message to the people there that are listening is thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of the changes that are unfolding here around us. And thank you for having the courage to incarnate in the first place.
Hey there, guys. Hopefully you're loving this conversation. I'd just love to take a quick moment of your time to ask for a special favor and request. Please hit subscribe to the channel. The entire channel you're witnessing, you're participating in, you're a part of here is empowered by your subscription. It's you that powers this channel along. Please take a moment to hit subscribe. Thank you so much in advance. Back to the episode. In between lives, are we taking the time to sort of set our trajectory for the life? Like, I guess it's a bit of destiny, free will conversation here a little bit. But what are we doing? Like, there's spiritual circles. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go.
I love that. I love this conversation. I love that question because people say to me, that's why I'm sort of jumping in. Because people say, why do I bother? It's all predestined and I chose this incarnation anyway, so I suppose I better get on with it. Someone else will say, but there's free will. The energy of the universe is free will and all that sort of. Actually, both people are right. And the interesting thing is before we come into this lifetime, we plan some things. We may plan the culture we're born into. We may plan some soul contracts, certain events that happen for us. So it's like we set the scaffolding of what this life will be.
Mm.
And then when we arrive here, we exercise our free will in how we go about interacting with that plan. How do I go with the contracts that I put in place? Do I stay in the culture I was born to? Do I go elsewhere? How do I respond to these huge events that I've set up for my life that are going to unfold in certain divine timing? How do I work to find my path through with this human personality that I've selected for this time? And when we go back at the end of an incarnation, we don't debrief the infrastructure. Well, how did you go with that family? Well, I planned that family anyway, so it's more about how did I interact with them? What were my free will choices? And how did I go in the exercising of my free will as a way to evolve myself at the level of our soul and explore consciousness more generally?
It's a really profound point for me because I've interviewed quite a few people and the conversation around free will and destiny, and I love the way you've described that because it really puts a lot of meat on the bones in this conversation. Up until this point, what my current awareness is that you may not know if you were destined to be here or not, but one of the key things you do have is the free will to decide how you show up for whatever it is you're showing up for. And that seems to be like an opening to the infrastructure that you've just described in terms of, there are these. So, okay, at this particular juncture though, let's talk toast. And I can tell by the smile on your face, you know what I'm referring to, and I'll let you share it.
Yeah. The theory of the multiverse is that every time we make a tiny little decision, we create another reality. So I moved to humour no doubt you're referring to the that chapter in Quantum Consciousness where I talk about the toast realities. And, if I do peanut butter on my toast, if I do butter on my toast, if I don't have anything on my toast, if I have jam on my toast, does that create 4 realities? My take on this, because quantum physics, the multiverse theory tells us that every time we make a decision that we create another reality. My spiritually aligned view is that the soul will continue to reproduce itself into different timelines as long as it can continue to learn with the intention that it arrived here with. And I feel that there's a bit of a threshold with, does the soul split when we do different toasts? No, I don't think so. But if one of you leaves the house that day and gets in the car and goes early and skips breakfast and doesn't have toast and runs into a tree and has some sort of a life-altering injury, that's the way the soul will go. So the soul will stay with the toast and it will go with the other option as well. So these splits in the timelines that start to bring different levels of learning. It's like we're playing, continuing to play some sort of a game as an avatar, and it's an online game, and you have lots of different chances and lots of different decision points, and you go into a different version of the game with some of these decisions that reach a certain threshold where the soul can still learn from taking the other path. Now, I wanted to test this theory a little bit about accessing the alternate realities because in string theory, they'll tell us there's 11 different dimensions, 10 of space and 1 of time. Where are they? They tell us subatomic particles are empty. I don't believe they're empty. I think they're full of the other potential possibilities of these other realities that they're talking about. So they talk about that. Multiverse theory generally talks about the continuation, that the wave function doesn't collapse into one reality, but it continues on in all of its possibilities. So I tested it. And what we started to do was we would start to explore some of these decision points, and we'd say, well, there's a Pete that stayed in banking 20-something years ago, and there's one of them that got out and came and did this really cool stuff. So what happened to the other Pete? So, I've always been one to be the crash test dummy as we test any new theories. So, and it's fun too. So the interesting thing that I discovered is that we've always been able to access past lifetimes. But the quantum entanglement that we have with the other versions of ourselves in other realities that have taken a different path, I've found to be much stronger because we've come from the same subatomic particles before we split. So there's a higher degree of quantum entanglement between those two versions of ourselves, which makes them even more accessible in past lives. And that was one of the great surprises I got when we started this work.
Can you, for those that are tuning into the concept of quantum entanglement for the first time, just explain what's going on there? Because it's fascinating stuff. And maybe you can just start with 2 particles and
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll have to drop in Einstein's definition of spooky action at a distance. But beyond Einstein,
that's the scientific term for quantum entanglement. Spooky action at a distance.
he had a strong philosophical aspect as well.
He was beautiful as a man, wasn't he?
He was amazing as a guy.
He
started at a patent office and ended up being one of the greatest minds of his generation. And we won't mention the hair, but anyway. So spooky action at distance, put that to the side. 2 particles come together and they have a relationship and they can never be separated. And they've done experimentation where they've brought 2 subatomic particles together and then they've separated them by hundreds or thousands of miles. And they turn one this way and the other one turns the other way. They turn it back and the other one turns back. So these things stay and they're always joined. And remember, this is the subatomic realm through which all of us are part of because we're made of these same subatomic particles. So, it's sometimes you think of somebody and they'll send you a text message. Or you'll think of someone, you'll see them in the street. I mean, these are all evidence of, quantum entanglement. And Carl Jung, when he did his theory of synchronicity, a lot of that came about because he'd worked with, in a therapeutic relationship originally, but he worked with a guy called Wolfgang Pauli, who was a great quantum physicist of his day. And, Einstein once called him his spiritual pair. So, there was something about Carl Jung with his ideas of consciousness and quantum physics coming together to bring this synchronicity theory to the fore. And it's based basically on quantum entanglement, because that's what Pauli was talking to Jung about in a lot of those conversations that they had. So quantum entanglement, basically, but too much backstory, I think. Quantum entanglement is those things that have been joined can never truly be separated. And they have a relationship that lasts, that goes outside of time and space.
I have to ask this question, and pardon me for doing so, and pardon me for being the cheeky monkey and not pardoning anything.
Please.
But we all came from the Big Bang in many ways, right? So we are all incarnate stardust. And so now we start to bleed into conversations around oneness. But aren't we all, touchwood, entangled in some way then? Like all of our molecules in some shape, way, form, or manner? Like where does it stop? Surely it all comes from one original source.
I agree. Whether we call that source, whether we call it the Big Bang, with the universe continually expanding, and some people are pulling away from the Big Bang theory now, and probably because the TV series finished, I guess. But, there's something in this about how everything is connected, and I'm very much about the oneness. And the way I try to explain this is there's three levels. There's energy, there's consciousness, and there's awareness. And the analogy I try to use, Amrit, is that there's an infrastructure of energy that supports the universe, that everything's connected, and it's like that infrastructure. And then consciousness brings it to life, and then awareness is how we travel through that. So for me, if the analogy I use is like the ocean, the floor of the seabed holds everything up because it's down there and it's made of the rocks and the coral and the sand and all of that. And it's like that infrastructure of energy. Consciousness is the ocean that sits on top of that infrastructure. And then the sea life is the awareness that moves through that ocean of consciousness, not really knowing that it's in an ocean. I mean, fish just swim. They're not thinking, I'm in the water. They just do what they do. And that's like our awareness that travels through that ocean of consciousness, supported by the infrastructure of energy at the bottom that tells us what we're doing and where we're going and what our adventures truly are. So for me, consciousness is everywhere. It's just where we choose to take our awareness. Everything is connected, but some things are connected more strongly than others. For me, there is different degrees of quantum entanglement. Like when you've got a very strong personal relationship with another person, you can almost read their mind. That's because the quantum entanglement is stronger than the guy that you pass in the street.
And now we're back to what you were saying before about it. Oh, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah,
the quantum entanglement between our own, sorry. And then I asked you to digress from the point that you were making earlier a little bit into explaining quantum entanglement. And so the fact that we're actually entangled to ourselves across these different choice points in some way is quite profound in terms of what that implies. One of the questions that sort of emerges to me from that point is like, okay, let's say at these decision points, obviously we had the conversation about toast, and me buttering my toast in different ways doesn't necessarily open up a different dimension potentially. But or multiverse, but let's say we are everything everywhere all at once. And certain things are being triggered. How come I'm tethered to this reality and this awareness? What in your experience keeps us here?
Well, are you, or is it an illusion that you think you are? Let me tell you a quick story. My dear partner, she has a ring, and it's got 4 diamonds in it, 2 by 2. And we were living on a farm at one stage, big space. And she came to me one day and she said, one of the diamonds is missing out of my ring. And so we took it outside and we looked at it because these diamonds are pretty small. Anyway, because I bought her the ring. So there's something in there about 3 there, 1 missing. Oh, it was disappointing because it had been a beautiful gift from love. Anyway, oh, so be it. We'll never find a diamond on this farm that we live on. She came back to me 2 weeks later and she said, look at my ring. And I looked at it and there's 4 diamonds in it again. And I said, what's happened? She said, I don't know, maybe we've jumped timelines or we've flipped or something's happened. And some things were looking a little bit different. Get this. Another week later, she comes back to me. She said, here, look at this. There's 3 diamonds in the ring again. 2 weeks later, she brought the ring again. She said, come and have a look at this. There's 4 diamonds in the ring again. Now, I think this was something that happened to us, given what we were doing. She's been instrumental in the work over the years. I think this was an event that had to occur so that we could understand how easily we step between these different realities without even knowing it. So I think that there are, as we change the radio dial, a lot of people use the analogy of the radio dial. Everything is available. You just change the dial and you move into a different radio station. And these different realities are a bit like that. And I feel that the dial is actually our intention.
Explain that a little bit more, the intention piece.
The intention, yeah. I think that sets the dial. I was talking to a colleague of mine last couple of days and he said, he does this work and all that sort of stuff. And as you run businesses, sometimes people pay, some people don't pay. It's very rare in our field because people are so passionate about what they do. But someone hadn't paid him. And he said, oh, what does that mean? And I just encouraged him. I said, well, just don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. So when he let go of the fact that he was disappointed that someone hadn't paid him, the next day they paid. So it's like it shifted him into the reality where it no longer mattered, which meant that he had got paid anyway. I mean, little things like that happen in life and we see them either as coincidence or something. My glasses were on that table and now they're in the bedroom. How did that happen? I don't remember taking them into the bedroom. And I think this natural multiplicity of who we are, this multidimensional nature of who we are, I think it happens naturally and we don't necessarily have the belief systems to look for it. But I think it does unfold around us. But when we go specifically mining for something like one of these decision points, I feel that we can uncover incredible things that are really helpful.
It's probably difficult to ask you this question and get a response, because obviously you're doing this work all the time, so your belief system is shifting. So these awarenesses are precipitating different realities in your world as we're speaking right now, things like happening. But then the question I wanted to ask without that is do you think timelines are collapsing in on each other more and more rapidly at this particular point in time in history, more so than ever before? Because it kind of feels like something's happening on a collective awakening, and is that part of it? But then obviously it's happening more for you because your belief system is becoming more and more open. So it's are you a neutral person to ask this question or not? So with that caveat in mind, I'd just love to get your thoughts. Yeah.
Well, I'm doing my best to collapse them, Amrit.
Go on.
Let me give you a couple of examples. One of the journeys that I've taught people to do is called ultimate consciousness. And somebody might come in and they might say, I'm a bit stuck, don't know what my purpose is. And you can go and you can find out what that is and all that sort of stuff. But one of the opportunities that may fit as a separate session or even within a session is to use the radio dial to dial in a future state of them who has done their purpose, is in the highest possible vibration, has solved the problems that they currently have in their life. And we ask for that person to come out of the multiverse. We move them outside of time and space. We ask that version of them to come through quantum entanglement and meet them. And they have a conversation. We get them to blend consciousness so that they share that vibration. And what that I feel is doing is making that a self-fulfilling prophecy, that state of being. Now, what that does is that starts to collapse alternate timelines into one destination that is the highest possible vibration for that person. Now, we're doing that at the individual level. But I played with this in the last book I wrote, The Transcendence of Celeste Kelly, which is a fictional novel about a quantum physicist who discovers consciousness and sets about trying to change the world. And what she started to do was she started to get people to think about a future that was very positive for humanity, and they started to viralize it through social media. So more and more people got enrolled in this destination for humanity. That was a very positive one, and they could all start to describe what was happening 100 or 200 years out through the other incarnations that they were yet to have, that they were incarnating into, that were in that timeline in the future. Now, anyone who reads that book now gets enrolled in that as a concept. So this is my way of serving humanity towards the best possible future we can have at both the individual and collective level, by getting everybody to manifest a better future for this planet.
One of the questions that came for me through Mrs. Kelly was this concept of, does my future, like if time is not linear, and we were discussing this earlier, has the future already happened then? Sort of dancing back around destiny a little bit as a conversation, but yeah, like has my future already happened?
Well, if we're outside of time and space and the universe is malleable, we are creating a future in this moment. We are changing the past in this moment. We are creating different spin-offs and timelines in the multiverse through our actions in the present. So, which by deciding what we truly want, we're resetting the dial to bring into our awareness the reality that we truly seek. Everything is out there in all of its possibilities. How we surf that incredible network of different realities and different outcomes that we want comes back to our own intention that we set through creating that and moving us into those specific frequencies.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing. And Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive, and yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. I'm having an insidious thought sort of drop in, touchwood, mid-interview, which is... Pardon me. Just humble old me trying to do his best. But the intention piece, you mentioned the word, you mentioned that it's, somewhat guided by what people truly want, but there's many forces in the 3D at play trying to steer people towards wanting said things and other said things. That, in light of the conversation we're having, is potentially more sinister than we initially thought.
I agree. And I think that we've seen a lot of, it's been interesting observing in recent years media, information that's been offered to us through the news, through politicians, all that sort of stuff. There's been very much a fear-based dogma that has been offered to us. Some have enrolled and some have not. My take on that is that there's a lot of past experiments where if you bombard people with fear, they fall into line, or some rebel. And what I think is in the favour of the world at large is that souls can't be brainwashed. Only human minds can. And even though some people have fallen into line with some of we just call it the narrative, even though some people have fallen into line with the narrative, there's a soul and they're saying, nah, you can experience some of this for a while if you want to, but when the time is right, I'm going to bring something into your path that awakens you and helps you understand more of who you are.
Wow, that's really profound.
That's why I've still got hope. That's why I've still got hope for humanity. That's why I'm out there working to create the most positive outcomes for humanity more generally. I think we are in the midst of a great awakening, and I think it's inevitable.
Can you expand upon the Great Awakening and it being inevitable? And as you do that, I just wanted to sort of run this back to front, but yeah, I really love what you just shared about the soul sort of being, incorruptible, and the mind sort of having its journey, but it all being those little toasty moments for the mind, for the soul remaining incorruptible. But the Great Awakening, and the hope that you've got.
Let me tell a quick story because it informs this next comment. A client was once in one of these life between life states, and they were talking about how they'd come to this planet and they had brought the client to me to do this session to awaken the client. So I'm doing the client's soul at this stage. They're in a totally different persona to the person who walked into my clinic and sat in the chair. And I'm having a soul-to-soul chat. And she said, is there anything that you want to ask me while you're here? So, wow, what an opportunity. Someone's actually in the spiritual realm asking me what I want to know. How many hours are there in the day? So I said something quite
You didn't
simple.
Ask that question, did you? No, sorry.
No.
sorry.
No, there wasn't a question.
Sorry.
But I said to her, why is the between lives work being made available now? So people understand their immortal essence, outside time and space, soul lineage. Why is this work being made available now? And she says, because it's time. What do you mean? It seems strange. She's in timeless space and she's talking about time. She said humanity is awakening and it's now time for people to understand their immortality while still alive and not having to wait till the end of it to discover it. I thought, whoa. So when we discover our immortality while we're still mortal, what does that do for humanity? I mean, that's just mind-blowing. I mean, fear of death goes. Concerns of karma go. all of this sort of stuff just falls gently away, and it sets us free to be these informed consciousness vehicles that we should be, powered by the full knowing of our own souls. I mean, what's that going to do for humanity? I mean, my goodness.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, because some part of my awareness was having that awareness of our mortality as we're living feels, and I'm not sure how people feel themselves, but feels somewhat soul crushing. And one of the things that just got cleaned up in your sharing was it's not actually soul crushing, it's mind crushing. And soul expanding. This is really weird to be at this juncture and having a revelation mid-podcast. Sorry. Yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah. Let's be really open about this. And your hometown is Melbourne. I lived in Melbourne for 25 years. For some reason, I moved in 2019, just before the government made a whole raft of changes. That
one version of you still here, let's be real. Sorry.
Yeah, wonder how he's doing. But that's okay. But I mean, there was something about Melbourne became a very difficult place to live for a while, with all the restrictions. And it was really interesting to watch that, because there was a part of me that my friends and family were struggling in Melbourne, and I knew that. But there was another part of me that knew that courageous souls chose to incarnate and live in Melbourne during this period, because they needed to be there to hold a vibrational frequency that would ultimately bring healing to that collective group of people. And when I go back to Melbourne now to visit family, I see that has started to repair itself, and it's a very different vibe to what it was a couple of years ago. So all endurance that we take, all of the challenges that we have chosen are divinely guided. And a little saying that I love from time to time in that I like to offer to people in testing times. Every moment of every day, your soul knows exactly what it's doing. And I fall back on that sometimes when, and I'm an ordinary guy. I don't have all the answers. I'm just an explorer out there and finding things and sharing them. So every now and then we just need to pause and know, well, my soul's got this. The human part of me is confused. My disguise is in distress, but my soul is indestructible, immortal, and chose me ahead of 8 billion other people on this planet because I was the only one that would do. So again, a message for the people listening. Your soul chose you ahead of 8 billion others. That's got to be the greatest act of unconditional love that you will ever experience. So your soul's not going to leave you in dire straits. Your soul's going to hold your hand and be there with you through everything that you move through. So if it's worth remembering anything from our conversation today, Amrit, I think it's that.
Does this bleed a little bit into the conversation around soul seepage that you talk about? Is that a little bit along the lines of
the soul sort of seeping through into the human personality and offering us, higher wisdom and guidance? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And for anyone out there who's been, oh, that came to me really easily, or wow, I just knew how to do that. I'm not sure I did. I mean, a lot of these examples of soul seepage. But the other beautiful thing to know, and this I've said this to so many people over the last 20-something years, I need to know what my purpose is. I need to find my purpose. Well, why do you need to find something that's encoded on the fabric of your soul? It's actually there already. And so many people have said, am I doing my purpose? And then we go into this afterlife type scenario or into an expanded state, into the quantum field, and they find out they've been doing it all their lives in one way or another. What are you here to do? I'm here to serve others and help other people, or I'm here to teach people new ways. Oh, I've been a primary school teacher and I've sometimes moved outside the curriculum and I've been doing that for 20 years. Okay, there you go.
Yeah. I love the term soul print. and it's very present in this conversation for us right now. It's like there's a blueprint for your soul, but then also it has this context of the thumbprint where it's completely unique to you. And yeah, it's just something that has been dancing with me for a while, this concept of a soul print, and it just sparked alive in this particular point in our conversation. I am, at this particular point in the conversation, quite intrigued that we've been discussing so much about the nature of consciousness, and I don't think I've remarked enough about just how profound that metaphor of energy being the infrastructure and the seabed, and consciousness being the ocean and the water, and the awareness being the different animals that are living out those different experiences, and we can actually shift our awareness through the medium of consciousness. Like, that metaphor is so powerful to live with and to have. And, you wrote the book Quantum Consciousness, and I can't believe we've been talking for an hour and not talked about, we can talk about stored consciousness, alternate consciousness, there's interdimensional consciousness, there's eternal consciousness, there's, because for most people, consciousness is enough to wrap their head around, let alone 6 to 8 other different states. Can you illuminate us around, quantum consciousness? And I think a great place to start would be the remembering that you espouse. Yeah.
Yeah. People say to me, what is the role of quantum consciousness? And it's really simple for me, Amrit. It's to help people remember. And when you remember beyond human memory, you are set free from the foibles of human life. When you remember that you're immortal, that you're multidimensional, that you're here to make a difference to humanity, it just informs every decision and changes the way in which you see your life. I mean, I get up in the morning and I see Pete in the mirror, and, like I said before, I don't have all the answers. I'm still trying to find the right questions. Like most, quantum physicists out there, they say if you really get quantum physics, you don't get quantum physics. But, I look in the mirror at the disguise and I say, I wonder what Pete's got in store for him today. And what can I do as Pete that either helps people or sends some messages or brings some awareness or helps out a little bit. And I see Pete as a component of who I am. But it's not who I am. Because I'm a lot more than just Pete, but I need Pete. Pete's really important to get stuff done. I mean, my soul can't do a podcast, but Pete can. So, there's ways in which we do that. All those realms of consciousness that you offered are simply a model to bring context, that there are other versions of, Pete's got some stored consciousness. He's stored a lot of his thoughts and his memories and the events in his life. Are they in the best possible vibration, or is there some work that needs to be done there, or are there some gifts he's forgotten about? And that's what's stored in there. There's other versions of Pete that I can learn from that have gone through that split in the timelines into other realities. There's me incarnating in other bodies in the history of this planet, and I've seen lots of my other ones now. I've been a shaman and a soldier and all this sort of stuff. And a lot of those different ones have something to offer me as Pete, so they're ready to be explored. Interdimensional consciousness. We've been on other planets, in other dimensions. We've existed in energetic forms. To actually tune into some of those things and to feel what it's like to be energy drifting through the universe is a great way to experience freedom. Once you've experienced that, you carry that vibration with you going on from there. The eternal consciousness, when you blend with the fabric of the cosmos itself. I mean, there's no other feeling like that. It's, I know we can find it in meditation and other ways, etc., but there's something about embracing that eternal consciousness and feeling what it's like to be the fabric of your soul and then bring that back into the human body. That's changing for people.
It's incredible to feel what can be accessed as we open ourselves up to remember, as you put it. There's also the interdimensional stuff's quite profound, because your work found some consistencies, many consistencies, a lot of people's interdimensional experiences. I think it's rude of me to not actually discuss the eternal consciousness at this juncture when it's the most profound, or is it most profound? It is. But nonetheless, the interdimensional stuff, like there was aqueous, and like you said, you shared the energetic experiences, but there's also lots of aqueous experiences that people report back from. Is that correct?
This whole universe is full of water-type planets, and people who often incarnate into water-type creatures on those planets. That's a theme I have seen over the years. I once did a research paper on 111 cases of interdimensional consciousness that were done by my people, and there's only a couple of them done by me. So it was great to pull other people's work into it to give the research a bit of credibility. And I can't remember how many, I think it was 33 different facilitators sent their work in for these. And we found that of the 111 cases, there were some really strong themes, and one was actually being a type of being in another type of body, and there was a lot of water lives that were involved in that one. It was about being in an energetic form. It was about coming in contact with beings that were from other civilizations, and that as a version of themselves, they actually existed as a Pleiadian or an Arcturian or some other thing. So by the time you looked at those top ones, we got to about 80% of those experiences. So for me to have that consistency across, dozens of client experiences, that brings credibility, because they just go where they go. We don't tell them where to go. We just ask for them to come forward in the interdimensional type of consciousness, and they had those similarities. So it wasn't 7,000 cases, but once you get up over 100, you've got a pretty good sample.
So it might be obvious at this point to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. So how does all this awareness facilitate healing? Because I can feel a lot of people come to your work for healing, to better move through life with that lens of healing. How does all of this culminate to that?
Can I be a little controversial?
Please. It needs to be rude not to, especially at this point. You were holding back? No, sorry, please continue.
And if I've got a broken leg, I'll go to the hospital. If I'm having an appendicitis attack, you go to the emergency room. I have a lot of respect for medical science that can do a heart transplant and save a life. When it comes to disease and healing, though, I think a lot of our medical model is on the wrong track. I think a lot of the source of the diseases that we're finding has some sort of an energetic basis. I had a session with somebody last week and we were looking at a tumour, and we went into that tumour and we found 5 traumas from their past that hadn't been let go of. I work with somebody with a bad knee and there's a fear about not going forward. I mean, some of this echoes into Chinese medicine as well. Some of the, the thoughts that they have. Somebody with anxiety might have been born anxious because they picked it up from mum in the womb, and that person is empath. So we go back to the womb and we reset them. We take mum's anxiety out and we restart their timeline without the anxiety, and it disappears in the present. I mean, this is the stuff that is possible. Depression. I never got over losing my grandfather when I was young. I went to the funeral and I picked up everybody's sadness and been carrying it with me in my heart ever since. So when you look at these things energetically and metaphysically, the sources of these senses, these discomforts, if these dis-eases, they come from a different place. Now, medical science will often address symptoms. They'll do medications, they'll do operations, they'll do cognitive behavioural therapy. When this much of us is like the beta brainwave patterns, but the alphas and the thetas hold incredible wisdom. The quantum field holds incredible information. I think that medical science needs to embrace quantum science and start to look for these things in new ways, and that will mean that we're not a society that is affected by chronic disease, by limited healing mechanisms, that is over-medicated in a way that no one tracks the side effects and how they go across each other. I mean, there's no manual. It says you're on these 5 medications. This is what to watch for any of the compounding side effects across these 5. I mean, that book doesn't exist. So I think we need new thought in medical sciences, and I think we need to embrace some of the metaphysical and energetic healing mechanisms and bring them into mainstream.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I've got a really trippy question. I just was wondering if I was going to ask you this today. Michael Newton has passed on, massive mentor of yours. Through your work, do you still get some sort of communications in some, like, do you still receive insights, wisdom from him even though he's passed on? Like, is that a thing that happens or not really?
Yeah, that's a very personal question. I'm happy to answer it.
Sorry.
Generally. Yeah, generally. No, let me say that Michael still hangs around the Newton Institute. And it's really funny. And to tell you a couple of stories, there was a research meeting that we had once and the lights were flickering on and off. There was, I'll show you. Here's a personal one, which I'll show you. I went to America at one stage and I did the eulogy at our World Conference for Michael. And it was a difficult moment for me to, with all of my own memories, and get up and I had a great chance to honour his life, so that was great. And I got back and I unpacked my suitcase, and this strange little thing was in the bottom of my suitcase, N for Newton. Now, I have no idea where that came from and what happened. But that's one thing he had, was a great sense of humour. So he's still around. He's still a resource for us. There's times when I think, I wonder what Michael would do with this. And then an answer comes. So I wonder what he'd think of that. Would he think we should do this? No, I don't think he would. Oh, but he would want us to do that, I feel. So when you're accessing the quantum field, and obviously when you know someone, you're quantumly entangled with them. And I encourage anybody that has lost somebody in this life, continue to have the conversations, because they can hear you. And you may not hear their responses with your ears, but you'll feel their responses with your heart. So I think it's a great field of endeavour to continue to tune into the legends that we've known.
You mentioned the heart, and I think that's a really important point to discuss here, because I think there are people tuning into this conversation that, well, if they've made it along this far, I doubt there's any skeptics still this far into the conversation. But nonetheless, for those that are skeptical about us being in multiple places at once, the nature of time, all the sort of conversations that we've had that lead to the type of healing work that Michael, yourself have been sort of building up through the ages. What do you say to those people?
First of all, I'm a great embracer of healthy skepticism. Being closed to people's belief systems and to new things is very different from being a healthy skeptic. And as somebody who was a career banker for over 20 years in my youth, I would have seen all the stuff as we were back then, as I mentioned earlier. And what changed my mind was personal experience. And actually being in some of these things and drawing my own conclusions from my own experiences, seen through my own eyes and heard through my own ears and felt through my own energy field. So I encourage the healthy skepticism. But let me say as well, when it comes to the heart, it comes to the head. I remember years ago when one of my daughters turned 21, I wanted to sit down and wanted to write something quite meaningful on a card for her. And I came up with this, and I said, in life, there's 2 ways you make decisions. You can make them with your head, or you can make them with your heart. And it's great when they're aligned, but sometimes they won't be. So when you have a decision to make, the head goes one way and the heart goes the other, and you say, follow the heart, because the head holds fear and the heart holds courage. So for me, the heart is the place that we don't pay enough attention to. People who are, in the type of work that you and I do, it's all about the heart anyway. But the head does hold fear, because I've known that from people that I've worked with, anxieties, phobias, all of that sort of stuff over a long period of time. They all live life in their head because they're forced up there and because they don't want to feel the fear. So they're forced into their head. So I encourage everybody to get back into your heart, because it's limitless in its potential.
Thank you for sharing that. It's it's quite a, what's echoing back for me is like the journey from the head to the heart. It's one of the longest ones you'll ever take in your life as well. And yet also it's so simple, the ability to sort of flip and switch between the two and go, oh yeah. And I love that distillation of fear only really lives in the mind, or in the head. The heart has its own, frequency. Man, there is so much in this conversation that's blowing the lid off of so much of what we generally believe is available to us. And I think that opening of our minds and our hearts to what's possible, and then coming back to your theme and the way, I'm not sure I got you to describe it today, but your view on the quantum being the science of possibilities. It just feels like the possibilities are just so open if we're willing to explore here. I do have some rapid fire questions I usually close on, but before I get there, I wanted to ask, is there something else you wanted to share today while you've got the opportunity, like anything you wanted the listeners to really take away today?
Well, I guess part of the theme has been quantum consciousness, and you mentioned the science of possibilities, and I just want to add a little bit on the end of that, because quantum physics is the science of possibilities and consciousness is the fabric of reality. So when you put the science of possibilities with the fabric of reality, you get quantum consciousness. And it echoes an energy of limitlessness that we all are. And for anybody who feels limited, or anyone feels that they're not magnificent in their knowing, they just haven't remembered yet.
I love that. Thank you so much for that reminder. Yeah. A couple of rapid fire questions. What is your definition of living a good life?
Leaving the world a better place than when you got here.
How do you define God?
All there is. I dropped the G word out and just call it the universe, or all there is. And if you substitute all there is for God, then a lot more people enroll in the conversation.
What is the ultimate purpose of life?
I think to serve others and enjoy it while you do it.
How do people find out more about you?
Is that still a rapid fire question?
Try your best.
Okay. I'll put forward a couple of websites. My website for me is quantumconsciousness.com.au for Australia. The organisation that I lead with so many beautiful people involved in it now is instituteforquantumconsciousness.com. More about our work at the Michael Newton Institute at newtoninstitute.org.
I love that. Wow. The biggest takeaway for me today, amongst so many things, so many great metaphors you've shared with us, the big thing was the power of intention, and just how important it is to sort of anchor that in, because as we're sort of reality transurfing through it all, the intention really is the opportunity to adjust the dial. Is that a safe takeaway for me to be taking away out of, like, we've discussed a lot, and I encourage people actually to listen back to this one a couple of times, but yeah, are you comfortable with me taking that away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, what that echoes to me as well is the power to create our own reality. That we can have what we want, we get out there and we are creators, that we can bring into being whatever we want. But I would like to offer a little something on the end of that, if I can.
Please.
And this is something I said to you off air, and I want to say it on air, and that is thank you for the work that you do. And I used a word for you before because you help us to get our work out there. And, you know, I talked about you being an amplifier for our purpose. And I think you had a different word for it, but I like amplifier better.
I use the word supporter.
I
use the word supporter.
You know, you bring this work to the people that are interested in what you have to say and the people that you want to share the work of. So, thank you for amplifying what we do.
Oh, Peter, it is such a blessing. And, my deepest gratitude. Well, I always find it difficult at this particular juncture to express my gratitude for having you on the show today, because it's how much work has gone into informing this conversation. And, and that's where, I apologize if some of my questions have been geared around Michael today, including yourself, but okay. Much of what your work, stands on the shoulder of the giant that was Michael as well. And then, so I just tried my best to honor all of that. And my deepest gratitude for not just both of your work, but just the beings that you are to, like you said, I think for those that are tuning into your works will start to realize that you're doing this work on multiple levels. And I think you mentioned that before, like, you're trying to collapse. There's like a little sneaky little insight there. But there's a lot of work that goes on in both of your awarenesses and how you're carrying this work. So thank you for doing this with us today, but thank you for being you, really.
Thanks so much. It's great to be part of this, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. So it was good that we finally had it. Thank you.
Yo.
Great
Whoa. Show. Yeah, it was amazing. We covered a lot of ground. I always knew we were going to. We did it.
And look, that's just so much better to let it flow organically. I've had some podcasts where people have just, they've got 10 questions and they won't divert from them. It's not a conversation, and it doesn't bring to the people what they need. So thank you for doing it the way you do it, as well as the way that the fact that you do it in the first place.
Oh, touch wood, brother. Thank you so much. It's very humbling to receive your kindness.
I think we end up, as long as we listen, we end up where we're meant to be. I mean, you're a great example of that.
Touch wood.
I'll tell you this because it might be important one day.
Please.
I did this whole purpose thing and I was chasing stuff and it was all going pretty well. And then one day I surrendered my need to have a purpose. And I said to the universe, I want to serve, just show me where I need to go and tell me where I want to do. I'll just be of service and I don't need a purpose anymore. And then more opportunities started to come because the universe started to use me as a mechanism through which it could do its work. So I don't actually have a purpose. I just do what comes.
The mind gets really caught on the polarities of things, but spiritually those, the two oppositions in spirit realm don't really exist, right? And so realizing that, like, I often have been, like, now been in this long enough for like 7 years to sort of recognize, like, the best mindset coach is the one that isn't even talking about mindset at that point. It's spirit set. It's like we've transcended the mind into spirit. Yeah, I'll mindset coach you, and similarly, it's like, the best purpose coach is like surrender to the purpose of life, it's just, and just use me as you will, beyond your own will.
Beautiful.
Which is, thank you for that. Alrighty, Inspired Soul, you've made it through to the end of another Inspired Evolution podcast. Thank you so much for your inspiration to evolve. I'm so inspired by your persistence, your diligence, your dedication to your inner work. to evolve. On screen right now is an opportunity for you to continue your inspirations and to keep the evolution flowing. There are a couple of episodes on screen which are two personal favorites of mine. As always, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps so much more than we can say. This entire channel is powered by your subscription. And yeah,